Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content I'm putting up, make sure you subscribe so you always know when a new video pops up. Now that we got that part out of the way, let's get into the video. Final Fantasy XIV is a massive game with thousands of hours of content. What I'm going to do here is break down some of the major plot points for those of you who want to know more about Eorzea, but may not have time to experience it all firsthand. This time, we're covering the story of the Dragoon. Ewain, the leader of the Lancers Guild, receives an urgent message from a friend of his from Ishgard begging for help. Because of their ongoing conflict with the dragons, Ishgard has kept its borders sealed, but they always give aid to their allies, so it's only fair that you return the favor. Ewain offered to send a group of wood whalers, Gridania's military, to help, but the offer was declined due to a need for secrecy. The Ishgardian wants someone trustworthy, so Ewain sends you to meet with Sir Albric and Kurthus. Albric dives right into it. An Ishgardian relic called the Eye has been stolen, and the culprit is supposedly in the area. He wants your help tracking him down. The thief is a trusted dragoon by the name of Estinien Wormblood. Albric doesn't know the area or the people very well, so it's your job to follow a few leads to track Estinien down. You find him fairly quickly, although he's a bit insulted that Ishgard sent an outsider after him. He gets ready to kill you, but the Eye begins to resonate with you. He decides to let you live before jumping to the top of the mountain. And that is why you do not skip leg day. Albric is shocked to hear that the Eye resonated with someone else, but since it happened to you, he decides to tell you a little bit about what's going on. The Eye holds the power of a powerful dragon, and it bestows it upon the strongest dragoon, allowing him to fight against dragons on equal footing. That man, or woman, becomes the Azure Dragoon. Those powers were given to Estinien, and Albric was once his teacher. Albric plans on getting the Eye back from Estinien, but he can't do it alone. Since it resonated with you, Albric's own Dragon Soul Stone radiates with you as well. He doesn't know why, but he gives you the stone to help you harness the power of the dragon that's stirring within you. Albric had been the Azure Dragoon before Estinien, but that power has been lost to him, so the Soul Stone was useless in his hands anyway. He is glad that it chose you, because no one can fight against an Azure Dragoon except for another one, and knowing Estinien, this mission will probably end in a fight. Estinien's power is unmatched, even among Azure Dragoons of the past. Fighting him with your skills would be like attacking a dragon with an umbrella, but Albric is going to train you so you can hopefully fight Estinien as an equal. Before you begin, he tells you of how Haldrath attacked the great worm Nidhogg after Thornton was killed, and stabbed the dragon in an eye in ancient times. Nidhogg's eye is the very relic that Estinien now possesses. The power of dragons come from their eyes, and the holder can draw on them, making themselves even more powerful, but that power can corrupt you, allowing the dragon to gain complete control of your body and mind. You can resist it, but the more powerful the dragon, the less likely you are to do so, and Nidhogg is one of the most powerful dragons in existence. After the long history lesson, Albric sends you to meet Sir Brucemont for the next stage of your training. He has you do battle with some small dragons to see if you can truly harness the powers of a dragoon. Satisfied with what he sees, he sends you back to Albric. Albric sees how you are beginning to realize your potential as an Azure Dragoon, and he's relieved to see that even though you're an outsider, you are able to understand the dragons and the threat that they represent. He gives you a bit more info on the history between Nidhogg and Ishgard, and how the Great Worm has attacked the people off and on for generations. 20 years ago, Nidhogg awakened and began destroying entire villages. His return caused lesser dragons to flock to him and join the attacks. Albric, acting as the Azure Dragoon of the time, hunted Nidhogg until he finally faced the Great Worm in battle at the village of Ferndale. He and his forces fought Nidhogg for 3 days, and with the last of his strength, Albric stabbed Nidhogg, but took a serious blow of his own. He thought he was going to die, but his attack made Nidhogg retreat. Even though he survived, his injuries made it impossible for him to remain the Azure Dragoon. Estinien was the only child that Albric managed to save before Ferndale was destroyed. Feeling guilty, Albric adopts Estinien and raises him as a dragoon. Now that Estinien has stolen Nidhogg's eye, Albric believes that the disturbance of the relic will cause Nidhogg to attack again. With the threat of an attack from the Great Worm, it is even more urgent that you master your abilities and retrieve the eye. He sends you to Witch Drop to train with the Knight Hustine. Hustine is shocked to see that an aspiring Azure Dragoon isn't even from Ishgard. She summons a horde of monsters for you to fight, and admits that she hasn't seen anyone so strong since Estinien himself. The battle stirs the dragon within you, and Albric believes that the day for you to face Estinien is getting close. Surprisingly, he sent a message for you and Albric to meet him at the Boulder Downs. Estinien reveals that Nidhogg has already awakened and the Eye isn't responsible. He'd had a vision warning him that the dragon would rise, and as soon as he wakes, he'll attack Ishgard as revenge for the wound Albrecht had given to him and to retrieve his lost eye. Estinien believes that if he can take the eye to a remote location, then Nidhogg will follow him instead of attacking the city. That way he can save the city and get his revenge on Nidhogg for destroying his home, and he is more than willing to die to see that done. But with 2 Azure Dragoons to face Nidhogg, they may actually be able to best the dragon and survive. He wants you to acquire your own Draken Mail armor, forged in the blood of dragons, to boost the Dragoon's power. Once you have the power to wear the armor, then you will truly be a Dragoon. But you can only get it from the Trial of the Azure, which is a series of battles that end with you either having the power or dying. Estinien leaves, and Albrecht decides that it is time for you to acquire your armor. At first he was simply going to give you his armor since he can't wield its power anymore, but the armor bonds with the Dragoon through the trials, and armor bonded to someone else will barely work for any other wearer. He sends you to a place called the Ogre's Belly where Sir Brucemont will be waiting for you. After besting his task, Hustien's task is next. After dealing with their trials, Albrecht sends you to the Steel Vigil with a flute that will summon someone, entertain the visitor, and they will leave you a gift. The guest turns out to be a dragon, which is no surprise. You take it down and bring the skull to Albrecht, proving yourself worthy of another piece of your armor. You're now ready for your final trial, but before that, Albrecht wants to make sure that you are willing to face a being as powerful as Nidhogg for a foreign land. Being the hero that you are, you're more than willing to join your strength to Estiniens and fight the Great Worm. Before you begin your final trial, Albrecht confesses that when he told you the power of the Azure Dragoon left him because of his injuries, he was lying. He had given the power up willingly. Being a Dragoon gives you the power of the dragon, but it makes you more susceptible to their control. When Albrecht stabbed Nidhogg, his mind was bombarded by emotions that nearly made him lose himself to the dragon inside. To stop the corruption, he purged himself of the Eye's power. He was able to drive away the wounded Nidhogg, but the dragon's followers destroyed Ferndale in retaliation. Albrecht only had enough power left to save one child. He feels that now is the time to tell Estinien the truth before his hatred of Nidhogg allows the dragon to take full control of him. Before you can meet Estinien, you must master the secret technique of the Dragoons. Albrecht can't teach it to you, however. You have to take the power from a dragon. He gives you the dragon summoning flute again and sends you to Providence Point, where you defeat the dragon that appears, and your power as a Dragoon grows. It's time for you to get the final piece of your armor, but a message comes from Estinien for you to meet him at the Steel Vigil before you complete your trials. Nidhogg is on the move, earlier than expected, and you are going to have to face him as you are. When you arrive, Estinien points his spear at Albrecht and reveals that he knows the truth of how and why his village was destroyed. The Eye showed him everything, and since Albrecht is just as responsible for his loss as Nidhogg, he's going to kill his old teacher before he deals with the dragon. Instead of letting Estinien kill Albrecht, you step in to fight him. Estinien's anger toward Albrecht gives Nidhogg the opportunity to take control of him, but the power of the dragon flowing through you gives you the form of Haldrath, and you repel Nidhogg's power. There is a massive explosion, and when it clears, Estinien is nowhere to be seen, although Albrecht is positive that he's still alive. Your battle allowed you to awaken power that none had but the first Azure Dragoon, and you even summoned his armor from the Soul Crystal, something that had never been done. Your last attack seems to have caused Nidhogg to go back to sleep, at least for the moment. Albrecht hopes that Estinien was freed from the corruption and learns to control his rage so he won't risk being controlled again. Before you depart, Albrecht mentions that he'd heard a voice that seems to regret the rift that had grown between dragons and men. You have no idea what he's talking about, but he tells you that you'll understand in time. Until then, he knows that you will continue to use your newfound power in defense of justice. It's been a while since the Warrior of Light saw Albrecht, the former Azure Dragoon who trained you, and he's glad to see that you're still in control of the dragon inside of you. Which is good, because a horde of dragons have been wreaking havoc in Ishgardian territory, and they need you to join a group of Dragoons to fight them off. But first, a nearby call for aid needs your attention. Albrecht sends you ahead, while he and another Dragoon follow. When Albrecht and his fellow Dragoon arrive, you've already dealt with the threat. His companion is a woman named Hustine, who briefly oversaw a bit of your Dragoon training quite some time ago. She saw the end of your battle with the dragon, and even though Albrecht trained you, you still don't fight like an Ishgardian. She wants to learn to fight like you. A dragon named Grouli has been terrorizing Kurthus, and she's been charged with taking it down. She's second in the order of Dragoons, under Estinien himself, but she still doesn't think she can beat the dragon. But with your training, she thinks she can handle it. Albrecht thinks it will help you get stronger too, so you agree to take her on as a pupil. The advice Albrecht has for you is to be patient with your new student and to try to keep her from pushing herself too hard. She's a bit hot-headed. At the moment, she's out testing herself against dragon spawn in the Highlands, so you go to give her a lesson only to find that she wasn't fighting one or two dragons, but a swarm of them. She had tried to fight like you and ended up getting overrun. If she fought a normal way, she would have won easily, which makes you wonder why she's trying to switch from what works for her. She wants to watch you fight, so she can try to copy your moves, so you let her watch while you take down a large dragon. After the fight, she realizes that you don't fight much different from her at all, but where Dragoons are trained to focus primarily on offense, you do something a little different. A simple thing called dodging. On a side note, there's a joke that Dragoons are the floor tanks, so I wonder if they put the whole tunnel vision thing in the story to tell Dragoons to stop focusing just on attacking and, move. In any case, Justine suffers from tunnel vision, and now that she knows it, she'll work to change it. However, it's late and she needs to get back to the congregation where the Dragoons live, and she wants you to come with her. Back in Ishgard, you run into Justine's father, Monoghanes, who apologizes for interrupting your plans, but since his daughter badly visits, he has to drop in on her from time to time. Justine was a child whose parents died in the never-ending war with the dragons, and Monoghanes adopted her. He was once a Dragoon and the sole reason that Justine joined the order, but she has to get stronger if she's going to become as good as he was. She hopes you can help her do that, but your next lesson will have to wait because Albrecht wants to see you and even Dragoons need a bit of sleep. He didn't want anything important, he just wanted to know how the training was coming. He also knew Monoghanes well. The man had been a great warrior until he got hurt and had to retire. Justine has pushed herself hard following in his footsteps until she was nearly Estinien's equal. However, Nidhogg's eye had granted his power to Estinien instead of her, and she figured it was because something was wrong with her. Now she pushes herself so hard that she's going to end up getting herself killed. The Dragon Song War is in full swing, and skirmishes between Dragoons and dragons have caused the forces to be spread thin. Justine is getting ready to join the battle, but she could use more soldiers. So Albrecht sends you to join her in Ishgard, and the sight of you makes her much more happy about their chances. Having the Azure Dragoon fighting with her puts her father at ease too, especially since you're going up against Grouli and his horde. Before you go, Monoghanes gives Justine his own spear for her to use to strike down the beast, and she heads off with a squad of Dragoons. You go to follow, but Monoghanes stops you. He wants you to promise that you'll look after his daughter so she doesn't do anything stupid. With that in mind, you head off to battle. The battle is fierce as you and your companions face off against hordes of dragons, but when the battle ends, there's still no sign of Grouli. Justine begins to wonder if the reports were wrong when the giant worm suddenly appears. In what has got to be the single dumbest maneuver I've ever seen, Justine jumps on the dragon's back and rides it off into the sunset like the end of a really bad romantic comedy. There's not a thing you can do for her, and Brucemont's already ready to write her off as dead. He gives you a piece of her armor he found on the battlefield so you can take it to her father so he can at least have something to bury, because the dragon's definitely going to eat her. He refuses to accept that his daughter is dead, and Albrecht decides to track Grouli's movements until he finds where he may have shaken your friend off. After a bit of hunting, he hears of a knight who had fought against a band of heretics. There's nothing that strange, except for the fact that one of them was using the lance that Justine's father had given to her. He sends you to join the knights in Riversmeet who are hunting the group, because if they have her weapon, they should know where she is. You follow them and find Justine bound and surrounded. You deal with the attackers and free the Dragoon, only to find out that when she'd rode the dragon, it had taken her straight to the heretics. So many of them overpowered her easily and took her weapon. She overheard them talking about setting up an all-out attack on Ishgard itself, and she wants you to warn the city. And if anyone asks, she wants you to tell them that she's dead. She's clearly injured, but she refuses to return to the city or to tell you why, so you do the only thing that you can and warn Ishgard of the coming attack. However, you can't fulfill her second request, and you tell her father the truth. He's grateful to know that his daughter lives, and he will stop at nothing to see her safe, but you have other problems at the moment. The heretics are indeed planning something big, and you have to stop them. They call themselves the Blood Bearers, and they have the power to transform into dragons by drinking a little bit of dragon blood. They've made an alliance with Grauli, giving them unlimited access to the blood, which is why they have been attacking so frequently. They've been spotted in the Chocobo Forest, which means Estinien may be going after them to retrieve her dad's spear, so you and Albrecht head there to seek him out. Estinien's already slaughtered them all by the time you get there. Albrecht tries to get her to come back to Ishgard, but she refuses, and she finally tells you why. When she was captured, the heretics forced dragon blood down her throat, and she's already transformed into a dragon. If she comes back to the city, she'll be treated like any other heretic, which, if they just executed her, she would be fine with that. But the Inquisitors would more than likely execute her entire family. So she's going to track down Grauli alone and deal with him. Albrecht wishes things could be different for her, but he's a warrior first and sees an opportunity in this. If she can master her new powers, she may be a match for Grauli. It may be easier for her to be corrupted by the power since she drank the blood, but what she's doing is not really all that different from you and Estinien harnessing the power of Nidhogg through the eye. Whatever the case, you certainly aren't going to let her fight the dragon alone. Some astrologians predict that the dragon will pass a place called the Dreaming Dragon in the Western Highlands, and if you know anything about Estinien, then you know she'll be there waiting on it. So the time has come. But with Estinien's condition, no other Dragoons can see her or they'll kill her. So Albrecht will make sure that it's only the two of you there to face Grauli. Win or lose, no help is coming. Estinien is leaving a trail of dead heretics, so she's not that hard to follow, and despite knowing what his daughter has become, Monargain plans on bringing her home, provided you don't let her die. When you find her, she is about to do battle with the dragon, but the dragon blood flowing through her is racking her body with pain as it tries to take control. She holds it off, and the two of you bring down the powerful creature once and for all. With Grauli's defeat, Estinien proved to herself that she could hold off the dragon's corruption in her body, and she will spend as much time as it takes to kill every last dragon in Ishgardian land. Before she can leave, however, her father shows up to take her home, but she won't put her family at risk, even though they are willing to keep her condition a secret. Her father's words do get her to say that once she has fully mastered her dragon blood, she will come back, but until then, she will use her new powers to protect her people in secret. Her words are enough to put her father at ease, and Estinien heads off alone to continue her crusade against the dragons. After Estinien's incident with Nidhogg, and something I'll cover another time, he left Ishgard to do his own thing, and since Albrecht was his teacher, it seems only fitting that you let him know about the Dragoon's departure. He already knows, and while he understands why he left, he would have liked it if the man would have told him. Of course, since the Dragon Song War is over, the city doesn't need an Azure Dragoon anymore. Honestly, the entire Dragoon Order is going to have to change since the dragons and Ishgardians are allies now. However, while Estinien's fine, Albrecht is still worried about Estinien. Ironically enough, Monargain shows up while you're talking about his daughter. She had sent him a letter from the Chocobo Forest telling him to find you. She didn't say any more, so it's off to Dravania you go. When you arrive, Estinien finds you pretty fast, and she's happy to tell you that the dragon blood is far easier for her to control now thanks to a new friend she made. His name is Onkai, and he's a small dragon who has heard a lot about you from his father. Onkai had found Estinien when she was being consumed by the dragon's blood, and he had helped her hold off the effects and learn how to live with them. Since he helped her, to repay the debt, she called you, because Onkai has a problem that maybe you can help with. His father had a consort, but since she was a part of Nidhogg's brood and Ornkai's father was a part of Racevelger's, the war forced them to separate. His father told his consort to fly to the east, far away from Nidhogg's war. She didn't want to fight humans, so she complied, but since the war is over, Onkai believes she'll come back, if she even knows that it's over. He wants you to help search for her, but she left Dramania 1,000 years ago, so there's no telling where she is now. Estinien would do it herself, but she's still learning to control her dragon blood, so you're the only person she can turn to. Always being willing to help friends, you agree, and you head back to Albrecht to see if he's heard any legends about dragons living in the Far East. He finds the prospect of a former dragon-slaying machine like Estinien going out of her way to help a dragon to be strange, but a bit pleasant. He does know a priest who is well versed in all things dragon, and the man tells him a story that may be of interest to you, although he warns you that these legends grow over time, and what people say was a dragon sighting may have just been a low-flying red chocobo, which would actually be much worse. I'd fight a dragon over another red chocobo any day. True or not, Albrecht wrote down the story for you to take to Estinien along with his well wishes. The story tells of the slumbering worm of Yerbania, so you and Ornkai head to the Fist of Raga temple in the Fringes because that's where the story of the creature started. At the temple, Ornkai goes inside, eager to find his father's consort, but his scream causes you to go running after him. Instead of finding a dragon, you find a giant stone guardian that attacks you. After you deal with it, the sound of the battle draws a familiar face from within the temple. Professor Eric, a researcher who you worked with during your time training with the monk Wiedergeld, was also in the temple researching the slumbering worm. The slumbering worm wasn't a dragon at all, but a priest named Imart who died 300 years ago. Eric goes into a long explanation about Imart being a monk with strength of a dragon, but since that's not what you came here for, you leave while the professor rambles on, not even noticing that you left. Albrecht apologizes for giving you a useless trail to follow, but he does have another one for you to check out. This one will send you to the far east to Kugane, but it will take him a bit of time to find a way to get Ornkai across the water since he's not nearly strong enough of a flyer to make it on his own. With a little time, Albrecht finds a way to transport Ornkai to Kugane, and he also told the dragon one of the local legends before the trip, so he should have a lot to tell you when you arrive. In Kugane, you head to the Bocasin hot springs where Ornkai is supposed to be waiting for you. When you ask the owner about him, it turns out that the way Albrecht had arranged for the dragon to travel was through FedEx, which he is not happy with since the crate that he was shipped in was full of ice. While dragons can put themselves into a deep sleep, they aren't bears and don't need to be in freezing temperatures for them to do it. Although he does admit that it was probably the best sleep he's had in years, which makes you wonder just why he was complaining so much. But since you're both here, you can continue to search for Fawn M. The legend Albrecht told him about before sticking him in the box was of Seryu, a story of a dragon guardian of the Far East, but Ornkai has already dismissed it, since the story is a couple thousand years old, and Fawn M has only been in the land for a millennia. There is another more recent story about the Serpent of the Ruby Sea that may be more relevant. Ornkai thinks you should ask the people of Isari to see if they can give you a bit of guidance. The story is very popular in the area, and while some think it's a fairy tale, an old woman assures you that it's not. If you want proof, she says you can find it at the Coral Banquet. Just don't blame her if it eats you. You call Ornkai and the two of you go check up on the creature, even though he doesn't think it's Fawn M. Dragons don't tend to eat people whole, at least not raw. Dragons always cook their humans before they eat them. It's not like they're barbarians. Ornkai is happy to use this time as an excuse to hunt, since you'll need some meat to draw out the beast, and by the time you make it to the Coral Banquet, he's already gotten the bait you'll need. He tosses it into the water and a huge serpent attacks you almost immediately. Ornkai did not expect it to be so big, but you deal with it all the same. While you didn't find what you were looking for, the young dragon's happy that you did at least kill a marvelous dinner. With the meat in tow, he heads back to Kugane. By the time your slow legs carry you back, the dragon's already eaten all of the sea creature without saving you anything but scraps. As a fan of seafood myself, this does not make me happy. Not at all. On the plus side, Ornkai likes this part of the world. Unlike the people in Ishgard, everyone is really nice to Duranians here. The owner seems to really want him to stick around, although it's probably because he brings in so many new customers. One of those customers told him something that may be interesting to the two of you. You go to meet him, and it turns out to be Gyoto, the Namazu that tried to turn you into the Empire when you were fighting to free Doma, the one that Lys kicked very hard and carried off. He promises that he's not going to betray you again, mainly because he doesn't want to deal with your violent blonde friend. There's a dragon at the Azim Steppe, so the people of Reunion say, so that's where you're headed next. In Reunion, Ornkai talks to some children while you question a few other people. The people know of the creature. Every so often it wakes up, destroys some stuff, then goes back to sleep in its lair to the north. Glad to finally be on the right track, the two of you head toward the dragon's lair. On your trek, you come across an ordinary warrior who asks if you're hunting the dragon too. The thought shocks Ornkai, and when he tells the warrior that you want to talk to the dragon, he laughs at you. The dragon's definitely not in the mood to talk. It took down 8 of Orneri's finest warriors, and the warrior runs off to tell his leader what happened. When you find Fawn M, you see that the man was right. The dragon is not in any mood to talk, and it attacks you too. The fighting gets intense, and Ornkai urges you to leave before either you die or you have to kill the dragon. He is distraught over his failure. You found his father's consort, yet he couldn't even calm her down for long enough to talk. He decides to hunt for a while to clear his head and promises to meet you in Reunion later. The hunt calms him, but it hasn't given him any ideas on how to calm Fawn M. Even though he's older than you by quite a bit, he still can't figure this out. Dravanians live a long time and grow very differently from humans, something you should have already known from how much time you spent around them. That thought sparks an idea in Ornkai. He's heard of dragons going into seclusion while depressed, and over time they have a mental breakdown. Consorts are said to help with this, which is the main reason why Dravanians get married. The cause of Fonem's fury is probably the extreme loneliness she felt from being without a mate for 1,000 years. The question is how to go about fixing it without Ornkai's father being nearby. While you plan, the ordinary warrior you saw before sees you and lets you know that a group of merchants hired a hunter to kill the dragon, and he's on his way to watch the idiot get eaten. Ornkai doubts a hunter would be of any kind of threat to Fonem, but just in case he's wrong, you need to be there, so you rush back to where you last faced the dragon. It's a good thing you did, because the hunter is none other than Estinien Wormblood himself. After Ishgard was put into the hands of Emmerich, Estinien decided to travel for a bit to find a new purpose since Ishgard really didn't need him anymore. While he was wandering around, he heard of Fonem. He had planned on reasoning with the dragon if he could, and if not, well, that's what his lance is for. He believes the dragon is feeling the effects of Nidhogg's call to his horde. He's impressed that the dragon even managed to resist the call to attack Ishgard, but fighting the pull of the Great Worm would drive anyone crazy. The only way he can think of to talk to her is to beat her until she's too hurt to fight, then have Ornkai hit her with his strongest roar to snap her out of her blood rage. The little dragon's nervous, but with you and Estinien facing the mighty dragon, there's nothing to worry about. Despite the two of you hitting Fonem with everything you have, Ornkai's roar only snaps her back for a moment. Fortunately, his father shows up and roars, calming his wife and letting her know that the war is over. Calm now, she thanks you, letting you know that 1,000 years ago, when Nidhogg demanded they go to war with the mortals, she couldn't stop thinking about the friends she'd made among them during her time with her husband. But the call of a dragon's father is not something you can ignore without pain, so her husband told her to get as far away as she could until the war ended to dampen the pain, but he couldn't leave Zenith unprotected, so he stayed behind. He would have never found her again had he not heard his son's roar. The whole thing makes Ornkai uncomfortable. Emotional stuff between adults usually does that to kids, and he drags you and Estinien away to give them a bit of privacy. He thanks you both, but the Azure Dragoon shrugs it off. After what Nidhogg did to him, he was more than happy to prevent Fonem from suffering that fate, even though the experience made him more powerful in a different way. Since he's left his old life behind, Ornkai decides that instead of being Azure Dragoons, the two of you will now be called Crimson Dragoons, since you harness dragons' power by fighting with them. Estinien actually likes the new title, and bids the two of you farewell for now. Ornkai vows to become as strong as his father, so next time the two of you fight together, you will be able to charge into battle on his back. But until then, it's time for him to go home to a much needed rest, and it's time for you to do the same. After spending so long on the first, the Warrior of Light heads back to the source to see how all of his friends are doing. When you stop by to see Albrecht, the first thing he does is comment on the fact that as little as you stop by to check on him, Estinien comes by even less. And even Justine barely comes by, although she has made quite a name for herself as a hunter in Dravania. Something Albrecht learned from Ornkai, who shows up right when you start to talk about him. Seeing you again after so long, the dragon is curious to know what you've been up to. After you tell him a bit about your journey on the first, the part about the fallen warriors of darkness' souls lingering on, struggling to complete tasks that had been important to them in life, makes him think of Nidhogg, and how his desire for revenge hadn't left, even after he died. You did manage to give the fallen warriors of darkness peace, but Ornkai wonders if Nidhogg ever found that type of rest. Albrecht doesn't believe that he has, and even though he and the worm were mortal enemies, he believes that the dragon does at least deserve peace in death. Ornkai wants to give Nidhogg a proper send-off, much like you did for Etta Blackbosom ages ago, and knowing the true history of Nidhogg's eternal rage, you feel compelled to help him. Not being of Nidhogg's brood, Ornkai doesn't really know much about the dragon, so it'll be difficult to give him a proper funeral, but Fonem is living in Zenith, and she knew her father well. So you and the young dragon head off to ask her a few questions. Fonem is more than happy to tell you about her father, just to let you know that there was far more to him than what you saw while you fought. Nidhogg prided himself on being the strongest, and he had never wanted to get involved with mortals anyway. He thought they were small and insignificant. But Ratatoskr wanted humans and dragons to live in harmony. King Thornton, in an attempt to find a way to get into Nidhogg's good graces, asked his sister what the dragon thought of the mortals. In truth, Nidhogg thought they were too weak to protect the world from outside threats, making them too useless to be allies. Thorin saw this as an insult and began to believe that the dragons would take over the world and dominate the mortals. I mean, a stupid thought when you really think about it. If the dragons see you as useless allies, you'd make even worse slaves. But Thorin decided it was for the best for him to claim the dragon's power for himself. So he stole Ratatoska's eyes, the source of a dragon's power, and killed her. Nidhogg was not happy about this, and his rage and hatred for all mortals grew out of control. But can you blame him? You don't go out of your way to kill ants until they start coming in your house. Once they cross that line, you kill every one of them on your property to make sure they don't ever bite you again. And mortals were ants to Nidhogg, ants that had murdered his sister. Not every dragon agreed with him, however, and Farnim is grateful that eventually you came along and reforged the alliance between dragons and men that Ratatoska had wanted. Onkai intends to make sure that his descendants keep that bond alive by letting them know the true history of both of their peoples, of the failings of both the mortals and Nidhogg, and how the great dragon wasn't a monster, but someone who retaliated against those who had murdered someone he had cared about. To help Onkai with his funeral, Farnim lets him know that Nidhogg had adored the scent of mist lilies, and they will make a good offering to the fallen dragon. He knows a place where those exact flowers bloom, and you go and gather a few. All that's left is to decide where to lay them. After a bit of thought, Onkai decides that Girabania will be the best place since it's where you took down Shinryu, the primal born from Nidhogg's eyes, a story I will cover another time. Together, the two of you go to the Royal Menagerie and pay your final respects to the fallen dragon, putting Nidhogg's soul to rest, and finally bringing the Dragon Song War to an end. This concludes the story of the Dragoon, at least for now. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video.